Hey everyone, and today we're going to do what we love the most, bankrupt the Pokemon Company, removing starters and plush sales from existence. In return, we'll choose 3 Pokemon from each generation to fill their spot. And no, we aren't going to limit ourselves to the water, fire, grass type triangle. We will focus on finding a trio of starters that, as a group, create a narrative, just like the real ones with a common theme or little story in all regions. An alternative universe where life is a little more interesting. Also, we were going to be very loose with stats, evolution stages, and other technical details, so keep your chill. The video is not a shopping list of 24 random Pokemon of a certain type. Let's just have fun instead, like Professor Oak has been doing since he invented the Pokedex, the same one that in Kanto would make us choose between the original starter trio. As of today, they are icons of the series, but perhaps the most confusingly themed. They don't have any common concept beyond being small domestic animals that become forces of nature. I guess they wanted to emphasize the transformation that the beings of this world experience when they evolve. I think we can do something more interesting. In a region that has as its main theme genetics and how human beings and their behavior influence the fauna of the world, the first option would be Koffing, who would be the choice of a few. It's quite adorable at this baby stage, and the anime has already proven how charismatic it can become. But of course, the horror of its evolution fits perfectly with the predominant themes of Kanto, the consequences and mutations that human influence brings to the environment. If Koffing doesn't convince you to start your journey, no problem. There are 2 other starters in their Pokeballs, except that it's not a Pokeball, but Voltorb. Ignoring all the theories about its creation and the doubts about whether it's an artificial Pokemon or not, feeding on excess energy from power plants and causing terrible explosions that affect the population, it represents that theme very well. Just as the Pokeball, the artifact that inspired its design, symbolizes the series. I know, right now with these starters and in front of the most superficial fandom of all times, Pokemon would have sold like 50 copies. But don't worry, to save the day comes the 3rd starter, Vulpix. That's right, there's a universe out there where Ninetales takes Charizard's spot, humans are an intergalactic colony, and Scarlet and Violet are well optimized. Vulpix would be the most eye-catching Kanto starter, making it the most popular. But like the other 2 lines, it represents the chaos that human behavior can wreak on nature and Pokemon. A very affable and affectionate species in its childhood that, precisely given its longevity, seeing the behavior of countless people for centuries accumulates such resentment that turns it into a walking curse, one to the level of condemning you to a life of misfortune just by touching one of its tails. Let's keep going with Johto. These babies are based on prehistoric creatures and the volcano that extinguished them. They are one of my favorite groups, but their theme is quite boring if we compare them with what would come. So let's try to do something more interesting, like relating them to the importance that the 2nd generation gives to tradition, culture, and respect for nature. Netu is adorable. Why doesn't anyone talk about this little ball? Its line also has an affinity for showing in places of immense artistic and cultural value, such as Ruin Valley of the Sevii Islands, and of course, the ruins of Alph. As a baby, it has a look that gives the sensation of always observing something. And as Xatu, it seems overwhelmed by a future that only it can see. Although, with the good work of the people of the region, I feel that its vision can be a little less unfortunate. Mareep is another Pokemon with huge starter vibes. It has probably been used more than one of the 3 original starters. Stop bullying Chikorita, you monsters. The way its line takes charge of the lighthouse as a renewable energy source and how its wool is obtained cruelty-free represents very well the eagerness of Johtonians to show respect and care for the environment after the polluted Kanto. Togepi would be the last one here, although since it comes out of the mystery egg that we get at the beginning of the adventure, it's the closest thing in the series to a 2nd starter in a game. And because it hatches and evolves by happiness, it would be the best possible representation of the new mechanics that this new world, Johto, introduced. In some way, evolving by happiness symbolizes that culture of respect and awareness that we've been seeing so established in this region. It's a Pokemon that fills with happiness and good luck the lives of the good-hearted people who get to see it, but only misery and despair to the poor rival in front of it. We arrived in the beautiful Hoenn, which focused on showing us rich nature, ecosystems, and extraordinary scenery. Almost like a letter of recognition to the previous generation's efforts to take care of nature and Pokemon. A beautiful and balanced world with what for me is one of the most unique Pokédex, with a rich and varied fauna that inhabits these ecosystems and starters based on adaptation. The forest gecko pretending to be a leaf, a hen from Japanese mythology that adapted to breathe fire, and the axolotl, a creature that adapted to be able to regenerate itself. Let's give our starters a different twist. Ralts is one of the mandatory guests of the video, and one of the Pokemon not considered starters that come closest to that role. It was chosen for Wally for a reason. They could have perfectly given him the one left in the lab. It starts cute, miserable, and useless, but very sensitive to emotions, making it pick up on people's intentions from a very young age, connecting emotionally with the trainer who really earns its trust. And despite the flaws and cowardly nature that prevents Ralts from doing much to protect them, it doesn't forget those feelings. That's why even as Gardevoir, it will protect them with its life if necessary. It's one of the Pokemon with the deepest bond with its trainer. What could be cooler than this? If we consider the introduction of Gallade, it's even cooler, a starter with 2 evolutions. Phoebus is certainly unexpected. With stats closer to Magikarp than anything else, it would be quite tough to start an adventure with it, but remember that we can change a bit the stats and moves for this simulation. The important thing is the background of its line, and how being a starter would boost it even more. The trainer who relies on a Pokemon despised by all, that practically no one chooses, and that is also extremely difficult to evolve, seeing its hard work compensated with the avatar of beauty itself. Slakoth would be our last choice, as controversial as the previous case. Having as a starter a sloth that literally attacks every 2 turns doesn't seem very tempting. But we have in front of us, once again, an incredible story. It starts with extraordinary potential, but lives a relaxed life and does things at its own pace. But by external pressures, it becomes agitated and irritable, an anxious and insecure being who finally learns to accept its nature, finding its true power in its origins. Within our narrative, it would be a real vote of confidence for a trainer to choose it as a starter, betting on one of the hardest Pokemon to train, but most powerful in its final stage that well used more than pays for that confidence. And the fact is that these 3 starters would completely leave aside that theme of adaptation to ecosystems to represent this generation from a completely different angle. The bond between people and Pokemon, and trust between the trainer and their team, with beings that require faith and effort, but more than compensate those who believed in them in the most difficult moments. Something that resonates with that generational idea, as respect for the world, Pokemon, and our own principles bring with them an exuberant paradise and exceptional power. Sinnoh, a region that emphasized the creation myths of the Pokemon world, inspiring its starters, directly or indirectly, in deities of different faiths and universes. I think we can keep that, at least partially. Riolu would be the first and another obvious one. Not only does it have starter potential, it could even be the mascot of the series. The concept of the aura is also fascinating for a Pokemon you start your journey with, perhaps even as a sign that you were meant to meet. 9 out of 10 fan games approve of this choice. Shinx is another baby with immense potential as a starter. I wouldn't mind it at all as a 4th starter. It's all good as long as it's not a Let's Go game. It's another Supreme plushie seller, while Luxio is a fantastic middle stage that would rank among the best of all the starters in my opinion, and Luxray is the perfect synergy between adorable and intimidating, edgy and protective. Honestly, it could have been the starter of these games if it wasn't for its type, an Arceus Ex Machina of sorts. Since we're giving ourselves some creative freedom by making them starters, I would give it some special ability unique to its species and related to its fearful vision, allowing it to rival the aura. The last one is Drifloon. Most of you will already know the dark story of this apparently adorable Pokemon. Children take it by the hand, mistaking it for a cute balloon, and are dragged around aimlessly while its vital energy on which this being feeds fades away. Or so the legends say. Maybe the Pokemon is innocent and is simply blamed for the disappearances in the region. Or maybe it's real and it has to do with appearing on Fridays at dusk, just when classes end. Either way, if they decided to give such a grim backstory to a starter, a breath of fresh air, while not directly based on a mythological character, this Pokemon would be the embodiment of all the superstitions and folk tales told to children to be careful out there, giving that common theme, folklore tales and mythology to the starters of this Neo Sinnoh. It's A good way to end the video, leaving for the future the starters of the 5 most recent regions. For now, take a look at my other videos if you like. Be nice.